Hello and welcome to the Total Mental Performance Podcast, the one and only mindset podcast dedicated to helping fitness entrepreneurs and coaches master their mindset, giving you insider access to industry leaders around their psychology, their campfire stories, and the mindset required to be successful in this business. I'm your host, Kieran O'Neill, mental performance coach and founder of Total Mental Performance, the world's fastest growing specialist mindset service dedicated to the fitness industry. So without further ado, let's lean in and listen.
Yes, team. Welcome to another episode of the Total Mental Performance Podcast. The guest that I have on today, I have so much infinite love and respect for this man. His name's Daniel Martin. He heads up our entry-level one-to-one coaching evolution program. And he's got an absolutely incredible story, a story of trials, tribulations, difficulty, and also a lot of success. And on top of that, in terms of what he does here at CMP, he's a mental performance coach, and he works with some coaches that are typically at the 30 to 50 client mark that are really looking to take their performance to the absolute next level. He's got 9 years of corporate B2B sales experience, and he's also led teams as well. So not only is he a qualified therapist, cognitive hypnotherapist, and NLP practitioner and mental performance coach, but he's got an absolutely incredible, solid business and leadership background as well, which is what really underpins the entire coaching philosophy here at CMP. And I'm really excited today. We're going to have an incredible conversation. Dan, mate, welcome aboard to the Total Mental Performance Podcast.
Thank you so much. Great to be here talking to you, man.
We're going to have a good chat, man. We're going to have a really good chat. So if you was going to describe to people what it is that you actually do, what is it you do?
I take people from good to great in its simplest form. We take people who are already moving in a direction that they want to be moving in, but ultimately have recognized some areas of weakness, those typical problems that we see, imposter syndrome, comparison syndrome, maybe some anxiety, these kind of aggravations. We look to identify those, and we look to identify where they're coming from ultimately and eliminate them and get them moving in that direction that they're already moving, but just accelerate that growth. That's what we do. That's what I do.
Love that. And why? Why'd you do it?
It's a big one. Why do I do it? You know what? I do it because I saw the difference that doing that inner work made to me. I was more in a place of bad to good rather than good to great. But the difference it made, kind of looking inwards, identifying what the areas for weakness are and working on that, it's just like night and day, completely different person. And I think that a lot of people are unaware of how much of a difference doing that emotional and that mindset work can really make to them. So I think once, experience it yourself, as many coaches do in their journey, right? A lot of coaches are kind of people who've been through difficulty in the past, and they've come out the other side of that and want to take people through that same journey. That's why I do it as well, kind of seen that transition myself and say, let me help you experience this as well,
So run us through your story. He's going to run us through a highlight reel. Where did it start? From a personal perspective into the professional perspective into where you are today.
Personal to professional to where I am today. Personal, I think I've got to start almost at day one. I was adopted at a very, very young age. 3 months old, I was adopted and had an amazing upbringing. My birth parents who did adopt me gave me an incredible life. And I'm very, very grateful for that. But, going through those early years of life, it was only when I got to kind of age 10, 12, 13, when all of that stuff started to make sense and I was able to actually understand what it all meant. And that came with some challenges along the way, so that adoption piece is a big, big part of my life. And you said the highlight reel, it's not all highlights, as it is for everyone. It's an emotional roller coaster a lot of the time.
Include the lowlights.
Yeah, the lowlights, that's where all the juicy stuff is, right? So let me think about where I want to go with this. So, as I said, adopted at a very young age, and life was pretty smooth, I'd say, up until age kind of 12. That's when things started to get a little bit interesting, a little bit challenging in many ways, because as you know, we'll go into this, I'm sure, in a bit more detail, but addiction has always been a big part of my life, right? Big part of my life. And it's only through doing work with therapists and coach, etc., that I figured out that really addiction actually became a part of my life when I was like 12 years old, and developed this addiction to fire of all things, you know, like setting fire to stuff. And I got kicked out of primary school on like the second to last day of primary school for setting fire to things in the toilets. And at the time, it was just such a thrill, right? Like burning stuff. It's that dopamine hit, is that excitement that I used to get from that. So that's that moment. If we like track back critical moments in history, that is really a moment where I think a lot of these challenges started, is identifying actually I can't stop doing this. It's so exciting and so fun that I want to keep doing it. So that was a key moment. But then going forward into secondary school, you know, first few years of secondary school were fine, and then found drugs. Drugs became a big part of my life. Started smoking a lot of weed when I was 14, 15 years old. Naturally, that then progresses. People say that weed tends to be a gateway drug, and for me, it certainly was. So I was smoking a lot of weed at age 15, 16, then started doing a bit of cocaine around age 16. Also around that same sort of time, methadone was a big drug, and it just kind of arrived, and it was still legal at the time. So very, very high potency. Methadone was available for a very, very low price. I kind of got into that for a while. Later than that, moved into drugs like MDMA, started doing a lot of partying. That takes us up to about, realistically, 2019. And throughout all of these years is when I was working in corporate sales. As you said, 9-year career in corporate sales. I'll explore that in a moment, but I'll continue along this thread for the time being. Get up to the end of 2019, consistent partying, consistent drug taking. And I experienced what I can only describe as an identity crisis. Around that same sort of time when, you know, COVID was starting to come in, the world was starting to change, everything that we knew to be normal just didn't really exist anymore. And that lifestyle which I had up until that point, you know, of kind of very materialistically driven, a lot of partying, a lot of, if I'm honest, toxic and artificial friendships and relationships, all of that was underpinned by the lifestyle, which got stripped away as a result of lockdowns, clubs being closed, pubs being closed, everything which I liked to do at that time, stripped away. So what actually happened with that lifestyle being stripped away, my identity just kind of got like a rug pull, you know, it's kind of pulled from underneath my feet. It's almost like there's a mirror. You've got no choice but to look in it now. All of that, ultimately like abandonment and fear of not being lovable as a result of being adopted. All of that was just kind of there, you know, had no choice but to face that.
Staring you in the face.
Staring me in the face. Yeah.
I think lockdown did that for a lot of people.
I think it was like pressing pause.
Yeah, it's like, right, everyone's going to stop and have a good old look at themselves. We're going to have a little timeout.
Right.
It'd be quite cool if we could have a cyclical timeout, perhaps like every 3, 5, 10 years. But it brought up a lot of stuff for people, I think.
Right. Yeah, good and bad.
Yeah.
Good and bad. Short term, worst fucking thing that ever happened to me. Long term, best thing that ever happened to me.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think particularly when people hear the phrases addiction, I think they kind of think, oh, but I'm not shooting heroin in my arm, or I'm not snorting cocaine every weekend. Right. You know, people kind of get lost in that. But there's so many different types of addiction, and on top of that, you can actually be addicted to things, substances, behaviors that you're not happy with, and still be highly successful and still be getting shit done. Yeah. And obviously I've known you a long time, and observing you going through those addictions, yet still smashing your sales numbers and still being like, you know, a top high performer in that area. People often think, yeah, but I'm not in that dark, terrible place. But that doesn't necessarily mean that an addiction is something that has to be something so extreme. And it also doesn't mean that it's black and white. If you have an addiction, you can't be successful. What you'll often see is some of the most top performers on the planet are all addicted to all sorts of things. Absolutely. All different areas. If you was going to define addiction, how would you define it?
Any behavior that we continue doing despite the known negative consequences.
Despite the known negative consequences.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah. Yeah, because like you say, addictions can be infinite, right? name a behavior, name a substance, there's probably someone in the world of 65 billion people. There's always going to be someone who's probably addicted to it, right?
Yeah, without doubt. And I think something we see with coaches is often phone and social media addiction. Like, it's absolutely huge.
Yeah.
You like Instagram, for example, as an addiction, is definitely something we work on with our clients. And I think coaches often wrap up their identity within their business, within their Instagram. A lot of coaches that started with a personal Instagram that eventually molded into a business account kind of get stuck in these little loops, because it's like, well, I'm kind of doing it for my business, but I'm kind of also doing it for my own validation. And then whenever they post something, they just can't stop clicking, click, click, click. How many likes, how many likes, how many likes, how many likes, how many people view my stories? Even I've fallen into that trap at times. And I think when we think about addiction and performance, you can actually leverage addiction, but often you're running away. So something that I see with a lot of coaches, and you see it too, is overworking, like working. And there's no getting away from it. It's hard fucking graft. If you want to build a successful coaching business, and if you're somebody that's pushing for scale, you've got to fucking work. But working to the point where you're burning out, you're providing a shit service, you're being a shit partner, shit friend, shit family member, shit, all of that, at that point, that is inherently addiction.
Absolutely.
Because you're trying to chop down a tree with a blunt saw.
Absolutely.
And I think it's got a stigma, the word, but the amount of coaches that are completely addicted to various different things is mental.
Absolutely. Yeah. Something that comes up time and time again in the sessions that I do with my clients, when I just break down that structure of behavior. You know, you've got the behavior itself almost on the outside of a circle, if you could imagine it there. So you've got work, in this case, like we're talking about here. You might have Instagram, you might have alcohol, you might have drugs, sex, porn, whatever that behavior is, doesn't really make a difference. Beneath that, you've got an aggravation of some kind. So like I said earlier on, something that we help a lot of coaches with is imposter syndrome, anxiety, self-doubt, resentment, judgment towards self. That's an aggravation, right? So that's ultimately what people are generally, I know I can speak from personal experience and say that I used to feel very anxious, and that's why I'd go and smoke weed, or that's why I'd go and drink, that's why I'd go and party, right? But a lot of coaches are kind of in this imposter syndrome, self-doubt kind of space, right? What's driving that? Because that's not an emotion, that's an aggravation, right? Beneath that emotion, what we find usually is fear, anger, shame, guilt, sadness, sorrow, whatever it might be, which is then being driven by something that's been experienced in past, usually, right? And that's kind of how things are structured. And sometimes for many people, I know that when I first heard how that was structured, I was like, oh shit, almost like a bit of a red pill moment, you know? But knowledge is power with these things, isn't it?
Well, there's being unaware, and there's being aware, and there's actually doing actions and actually fucking doing something about it. And that's like that's really, I think, the key to breaking down anything from a mindset perspective. We all have blind spots. We all have parts of us that we're just not even aware of. And having the right people around you to hold up that mirror and say, do you have to live like that? Is that completely normal? It's such a game changer. And obviously we've been very lucky to have incredible coaches and mentors in our coaching us and mentoring us, you know. And that's kind of what makes it fun. And if we think about the way that the world is set up, it's set up to profit from you. So Instagram is set up for your eyeballs because they make more in ad revenue. It's absolutely set up for you to get stuck within that. What would you say to coaches that are struggling with something like a phone addiction, for example? That's something I work on a lot with on coaches.
What would I say?
Somebody was struggling with a phone addiction.
Press pause. Understand what's going on beneath that, because a lot of the time, addiction is an automatic process, right? As you said, everybody experiences addiction to some degree. It's not an on-off switch. It's a continuum, like most psychological challenges that people experience. It's not on or off. Self-awareness is the key to any addictive behavior. And often, especially with social media, because creators of social media are very, very clever. They've kind of tapped into that part of our psyche and our psychology, which wants validation, right? And that's how they get people coming back time and time again. But just recognizing when that's happening. So taking a step back from the situation, saying, am I doing this for the wrong reasons? And then you can turn that conversation back towards self and say, why am I doing this? What is it that's missing within me? Is it this imposter syndrome? Is it some kind of doubt towards self? Because something that we were both taught as we were going through our training to become therapists is this common human neurosis, right? Of I'm not good enough. Something that runs in pretty much everyone at an unconscious level. And often just recognizing that provides healing in itself, doesn't it? Because the inherent nature of addiction is to run away, right? It's to go into a behavior to avoid the discomfort, to avoid the pain that's being experienced. But actually, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy in many ways, because the more you run away from it, the more you're fueling it. So just by pausing sometimes, recognizing it, again, we're in the business of holding up mirrors, ultimately, kind of guiding people through that process, right?
We're basically a mirror shop.
Yeah, 100%.
It's like a house of illusions. All these mirrors lying everywhere. Oh, Jesus Christ. What's coming back?
It can be overwhelming at times, but ultimately everybody holds their own individual mirror.
Yeah. 100%. And I mean, you've known me a while now, so you know that I've struggled with addiction. It's not something I've spoken about too much. Used to be boxing. That was an inherent addiction. I used to punch myself out cold, not knocked out, but just like severely underweight. You know, I'm 5'8" and I was 56 kilos when I was fighting. Like ridiculous. You could see like all the ribs on my back, my stomach, and it was just like it was so unhealthy. I did that because I didn't feel lovable, I didn't feel enough, and I felt like I had to really just use that as a form of validation to prove my enoughness. And particularly as a man, men have this kind of thing where it's like, well, how do you know a man's high value? Or he can knock people out or physically defend himself. He can make a lot of money and be in good fucking physical shape. And I took that very literal. And I went, right, well, I'm going to box, and then I'm going to go into corporate software sales, and I'm going to have a six-pack. And I was fucking miserable because you're looking for your happiness in the outside world.
Right.
And you're always looking at the external. But at the end of the day, the only person that can validate you is you. Nobody else can validate you. Not your mentors, not your friends, not your family. It always comes from internally. So well, how do I do that? I don't really believe in happiness, but I do believe in joy and optimizing for joy. And I talk a lot about my clients about joy optimization. Where do you fucking love what you do? I'm like a pig in shit when we're doing what we're doing right now. And when I'm one-to-one with clients, and when I'm speaking on stage or delivering masterclasses. And I optimize for that. That's how I like to spend most of my time. And I think if you can optimize for joy, make impact and help more people, you'll feel more validated that way, regardless of the external world or the external noise, because you're tapping into what lights you up on the inside. And that is a much more powerful and a lot more sustainable over the long term than burning up that dark energy. Now, dark energy isn't necessarily a bad thing, particularly if you're starting out or if you're in a really bad financial situation. You can use that to do almost superhuman levels of, I need to get so much shit done. And I'm not saying you have to operate out of light and love all the time. Sometimes you need a little bit of darkness if you're going through a gritty phase in life to kind of pull yourself out of that. Once you pull yourself out of that and you're going to a performance level, that's when you hit a glass ceiling. And that's where we're really looking at, well, what is the point? Why are we here? Even today, so we're hosting a TMP Lunch and Learn here in Manchester. And we're talking about two things. Meaning and purpose on an existential level. What is the inherent fucking point, and why not end it all now? And the second thing we're talking about is ultimately how to profit from your trauma. Understanding your dark, deep moments, like the parts of you where you feel really stuck. And those parts of your story are your unique IP. And often people don't want to go back into their childhood or go back into their teens or early 20s when there was some really dark shit happening. But actually that's where the gold is. That's where you can really build confidence. That's where you can really just connect with yourself. The more that you're authentic, the easier it is for your potential client to come and work with you. Coaches build programs for their younger selves. And the more you can understand that younger self and reprocess that younger self, well, guess what? You can help people in such a different way. And the power in which you can actually coach, it's just, our clients often get better results. And when we ask, why do you think that is? Well, I think I understand myself more. So I feel like I understand my clients more. And the more that you can do that, the more you'll enjoy your coaching, the more you'll optimize for joy, and the more you can validate yourself, in my view.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, I think that profiting from your trauma, that's really interesting, because think about what we do at Total Mental Performance, it's not about making people feel great all the time, because that's an unrealistic expectation to place on existence, isn't it? It's not going to happen. It's about taking people from the place of relating from emotion, i.e., I'm operating from a place of sadness. Everything I do is inherently sad. Everything I do is inherently shameful, whatever it might be. Taking them from that place, helping them pluck themselves out of that and relating to emotion as opposed to relating from it, because we are always going to have inherent difficult times. We're going to have moments when we feel bad, but actually we can use those to drive us in many situations, right? Something which I say to many, many of my clients when they say, I doubt myself a lot. Actually, you need that. You need an element of self-doubt, because what happens if you don't? Become too laid back and then you start losing interest, right? Whereas if you've got something inside of you which is kind of giving you that drive, say, actually, no, you need to kind of keep pushing here.
Every level is another devil, and you can change your relationship with that fear and self-doubt. And just we often associate with the chemicals that we feel. For example, I don't know if I can do this. Oh, fucking hell. Am I good enough? Who am I? Why would they buy from me? Why? But that's just a series of chemicals that's happening in your body, and your brain is choosing to respond to them in a certain way. You can change your relationship with those chemicals. So for me, I always use, whenever I experience imposter syndrome, I've built that. So when I feel it, I go, good. This is evidence that I'm going to a new level. This is evidence that I am pushing myself out of my comfort zone. This is evidence that I'm growing. And if I'm not feeling that, I'm probably not pushing myself enough. I'm probably just playing it safe.
Right.
And the more that you can almost seek discomfort and push towards that, that's an absolute, it just completely changes the game. Another thing is that a lot of coaches have a fear of failure. They're afraid of fucking it up. They have this fear that it's all going to come crashing down. They have this fear of, I don't want to put this piece of content out there. It might piss someone off. I don't want to ask this client this very hard, difficult question because I don't want them to be offended or leave. That fear of failure is so crippling. But if you can just completely change your relationship with that and just treat everything like an experiment, it's not failure. You didn't win or lose. We didn't succeed or we failed. It's just an experiment. It's all data. I'm actually wanting to get some TMP lab coats with like a big white scientist one with like TMP embroidered on the chest, and just send them out to clients and just understand that this is all an experiment. Life is literally just fucking one big experiment. It's all data. And you can choose to identify with the data and go, this is more evident that I'm not lovable and I'm not enough. Or you can go, oh, actually, it's fucking just an experiment. So let's see. We'll either prove or disprove the hypothesis. We have a hypothesis here at TMP that we can help ambitious individuals completely rewire their reality with abundance, with light, with love. I believe, and fucking top level performance, completely locked in. So you operate, you think, feel, and perform on a completely different league. That's a hypothesis that we believe the world needs and wants. And at the minute, we're just testing and going, okay, how can we bring that to the world? How can we deliver this to the world? It's not, I'm Kieran, I don't feel enough, so I'm going to prove everyone wrong, and I'm going to be the best therapist and this compared to everyone else, and no one's going to beat me or whatever. That's so egoic. It's about me. What's in it for me? When you tap into that bigger, wider purpose, like, well, what is inherently the point? Why am I put on the planet? Well, then any setback you get or any challenge you get, it's just a puzzle. It's like, all right, well, how are we going to solve this? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? And when you can kind of come to that place, well, life becomes so much more fun. It's a game. It's a game to be played. It's a serious game. There's consequences, and you don't want to, not take it seriously. But it's not life or death.
That existential question of why is something that's it's not really instilled in general population. I was talking about this 9-year career that I had in corporate sales, which, looking back on the surface, looking out from an outside point of view, looked very successful, right? Earning really, really good money, kind of working my way up the ranks.
You're dressed to the nines as well, mate. You had some really lovely suits.
Well, this is it, right? But why? I asked my younger self why I was doing that. There was no why at all. It was just, I just want it. I just like nice suits. I just like going on holiday. I like partying. I like putting drugs up my nose. I just enjoy doing these things. But it's almost like toxic success in a way, right? Like, what's the drive here? is there anything which I'm doing here which gives me genuine fulfillment? No. Do I feel content? No. Do I feel happy? Maybe externally. I've got nice things, got a nice car, nice watch, nice suit. What am I getting from this? There's nothing here. It's not really being driven by anything substantial. And that's that deeper purpose, that deeper why, which is so important, isn't it? If you're going to have, especially these coaches that we work with, a fruitful career, you've got to understand what's driving it.
Something I always ask coaches is, so are you planning to sell this business in the next 1 to 3 years? And the answer 99.9% of the time is, I don't think I've ever had one yes, is no. Are you trying to be in this game for a long time? Yeah, I want to be in this for like 5 to 10 years, if not 20 years. This is like my life's work. Well, what's the fucking rush? Why are you behaving and thinking and operating as if you've raised, £2 million on your seed round or your Series A funding, and you're like trying to build a business you're going to sell? You're pushing out of a place of scarcity, not feeling enough. I've coached entrepreneurs that are doing that. They are raising millions of pounds, and they've got investors, and they're like, we need to sell this in the next 3 to 5 years. That's a different game. Coaches aren't playing that game. And if you're playing the coaching game, well, then it's like, well, what's going to keep you in the game the longest? What's going to keep you fulfilled, engaged? And coaches often reach a place where they end up in, now what? They hit the revenue numbers that they want. They have the physique that they want. They have the house that they want. They have the car that they want. They have the watch that they want. They kind of get there and they kind of go, is this it? And they forgot to fall in love with the journey, and they've placed so much emphasis on the external, and they tick all the boxes. And a couple of things tend to happen. They either plateau, they hit a glass ceiling, and they just can't seem to move forward. They actually tend to self-sabotage, and they start going backwards. Or they jack in, and they go do something else, because they haven't really, like you said, thought about, well, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
What's the point?
Yeah. And let's face it, success isn't a number, is it? Success is a feeling, right? More than anything. And beyond that, it's not a destination. It's a journey. It doesn't end, right? You're getting clear on what's the feeling that you want to be feeling, not how many followers do I need to get before I've succeeded? How much money in the bank do I need? How many clients do I need? It's like, they're good metrics, right? It's good data to have, but is that a valuable measure of the success that you're experiencing or the fulfillment that you're feeling? Arguably not.
Oh, well, if you place your happiness in the outside world, you have zero control. Shit's going to happen. And you can't do it. You cannot control that. Down to you to actually control that inner game and go, well, shit hits the fan. So what? And when you chase and chase and chase and chase and chase, you're wasting so much time, when actually you can choose to be happy and grateful for the little things literally right now. How much do we really need? There's nothing wrong with ambition. Some of it's just, how far can I take this? And it's out of a place of light, fun, growth. Other times it's just chasing. It's like, what's the point?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I've seen in a lot of my client sessions is when we're doing work on scarcity mindset around money, is that actually when we do the deeper psychological work on the emotional components to that scarcity mindset of enough is never enough, when the expectation is removed from the situation, revenue skyrockets anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is a bizarre concept to get your head around, but it works. When you stop placing so much emphasis on succeeding financially and all of your kind of self-worth in many ways being tied into that figure, and actually start doing it from a place of contentment and fulfillment, the revenue comes.
I think when you chase the money, it runs away.
Yeah.
And, we used to be in corporate sales, that was our fucking job. We were paid to chase the money. We were paid, go out and win and hunt. And it was like, it was a different ball game. There was so much pressure. I don't know about your office, or you've probably definitely been in these offices. You walk into the office and on the wall, you can see how much everybody's sold. You can see who's number one, who's number two, who's number three. And because you know the commission structure, you also know exactly how much money they're making.
Yeah.
You know exactly how much money they're taking home. And that environment was a performance environment. It was ruthless, but it was almost like you're not just competing with the market and the tens or the hundreds of competitors out there, depending on which vertical you're in. but you're competing with the people inside your team,
Mm-hmm.
and you get so caught up in, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. You'd never stop and think why.
Yeah.
And you don't have time to slow the fuck down and create space.
Yeah.
For my coaches that have a coaching team, a lot of the stuff I work on them is strategic thinking. It's about creating space so they can actually slow the fuck down and think about what they're doing. When you're in those early stages and you're growing and you're scaling, we very rarely create a lot of space. So what happens is we have all of these inputs on and we're going. When you can create that space, so for me, that's why I'm a big advocate of King Days. Wednesday afternoon, nothing, no one, no people, no technology, no phones, and just being by yourself and journaling and thinking, is this really where I want to take the ship? Is this really where I want to go? And sometimes clients will say to me, yeah, but I'm busy. I've got a team now, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, fuck that. I've coached a CEO of over 5,000 employees. Even he can make 3 hours in an afternoon on a Wednesday. Don't give me that fucking bullshit of, I've just got too much on. No, you're just not making it a priority. So make it a priority. But a lot of people are scared to do that. What? Because they feel anxious. If I've not got things to do, then they start to get anxious. They start to get stressed. They run back into the work. And what a fucking waste of time.
Yeah.
An absolute fucking waste of time and what a waste of opportunity. So, if you're in that place now where you've got a team and you're starting to really scale, then fucking slow down. Be present. When you're on calls with your team, like be with them. Be like, actually hold that space. Because everyone can sense that you're not there. But for the coaches that you work with, they're typically one-man bands, maybe on the verge of picking up that first coach at some point. How do you help them and encourage them to create space?
It's difficult, because a lot of the coaches that I'm working with at their point of the journey, they're in that scale phase. They want to keep building, a little bit earlier on in their journey. But like you said, a lot of them are kind of at the 30 to 50 client mark. So they're doing pretty well, right? And something which I see really often is a lot of guilt around taking time off. Feel guilty. There's, again, coming back to this idea of kind of placing expectation on the outside world. It's very much a lifestyle, isn't it? Coaching. A lot of your life is kind of put out there for others to see. And I think a lot of coaches feel inherently guilty when they take that downtime, which means that they feel like they can't, which means that they're kind of burning out a hell of a lot of the time. And ultimately not seeing the benefits of taking that time out, taking a break, like you say, maybe doing some journaling and just kind of breathing. Just pause. It's okay. The world isn't going to stop turning if you take even a couple of hours out. But realistically, a lot of coaches have got time to take out. It's about structure, right? Structure is the key. That's the thing which I find myself kind of drilling a lot of the time. A lot of coaches, I don't have the time. I just can't do it. Let's work it out. Why don't you? Let's just map out what you do over the course of a week. And then when you actually do that, say, actually, I'm just scatty. I'm just all over the place. Implement structure. That introduces freedom, which then allows for downtime. It's that structure a lot of the time.
100%. But the reason that Dan's able to break into that structure is because he's often done the deeper emotional work to help them shift the reason why they don't have structure. A lot of coaches say they have structure, and then when you show they show you their diary, like how often do you stick to that? They fucking don't. They actually do. I never really stick to that. I'm just kind of working all the time, and then I go to the gym and I kind of fall asleep.
Yeah.
Part of that will be an emotional issue. Fear of failure, not being good enough, this pressure, go. Why? So once you've shifted some of those deeper emotional puzzles, that's when you start to put that structure in. They start to breathe. They start to be more consistent. They're less up and down. They're less emotionally volatile. So I think that structure piece is really important. But you can have all the best structure in the world, but if you haven't got the mindset and the emotional management to actually stick to that, you're just not going to be consistent. You're always going to be going round and round.
Yeah, absolutely. The key to highlight there is that guilt. That's the thread to follow. That's what's underpinning it, And a lot of people, zooming out from coaches for a moment, we've kind of got this idea in our head that change the behavior, it changes the problem, when actually that's not the case a lot of the time. All of these problems which we perceive to be surface level, I just need to do things slightly differently, just need to order my tasks in a slightly different way. You can do that all you like. If you're still operating from a place of, I say, I'm not good enough, or I don't deserve this, you can make all the changes you want at the surface level. It's not going it's not going to change that underlying core emotional issue.
Agreed. So let me ask you this. If you had one piece of advice for Dan, the high performer, and I've seen you smash some serious numbers. That guy who on the surface has absolutely fucking made it, yet underneath it there's so much pressure, stress, overwhelm, arguably insecurity, self-doubt, even though he feels like he's on the surface he's got it all, but underneath it it's not there. What would you say to him?
Big question. Really simple. It's okay to not be okay. That's what the problem with little Dan was. He was afraid to feel that pain, right? That's why he was constantly reaching outside of himself to go and take drugs. That's why he pumped himself full of steroids to fuel the insecurities, which led to surgery and all the rest of it, right? He just didn't want to go near it. It just didn't feel safe to go near it. My one piece of advice to him be, it's okay to let that in, because ultimately the pain, the wounds, those difficult experiences, the trauma that we hold on to, that's ultimately an incredible journey waiting to happen. But the first step in that process is opening the door and saying, hey, I see you. I know you're there, and it's okay. I got you, come in.
Without a doubt. And I think as a high performer, you're almost afraid to feel those feelings because you feel like you might self-sabotage, you might fuck things up. You can be feeling self-doubt, insecure, afraid, sad, guilty, and any of those emotions, and you can still get shit done, and you can still be a high performer, and you can still fucking win. That is 100% possible. But you need to understand where they come from, and you need to have playbooks to manage them, to leverage them. Like, sometimes when I'm working with professional athletes, they're like, oh, I'm feeling a bit anxious. And I was like, yeah, but you can still fucking smash out the park. It's not black or white. It's not, I feel like this, I can't do it. It's like, well, you can still feel like shit physically, emotionally, mentally, and you can still perform and get it done. And that's a deep level of belief of knowing you don't have to be 100% to still deliver and be enough and do enough to get the result.
Yeah. And something which I'd experienced is that I just didn't want to show weakness. I want to show vulnerability, again, particularly as a man in that kind of largely toxic, target-driven environment. You don't want to show weakness. You want to be macho.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Like, people would, I don't know if you remember, like, the sly comments of, not top of the board today, are you, son? Do you know? I don't know if you ever got those, or like you'd close a big deal and people they'd congratulate you, but like, it's not really congratulations. There's like a jealousy, or you can kind of feel it, or they'd make comments. You'd be like, oh, I thought you said that'd come in last month.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't.
Yeah.
Like that, those hyper competitive environments, is built on not feeling enough and more out of darkness than out of the light,
Absolutely. There's a lot of similarities which can be drawn here. The coaching industry, I think a lot of people, again, particularly earlier on in their journey, almost feel like they can't be themselves. A lot of the business is put out on social media, right? Of course, that's how these businesses are built for the most part, but they don't feel comfortable in putting a bit of vulnerability out there. And it's very similar to how I was feeling. I felt like I didn't feel safe to do that. But again, looping back around to what we were saying earlier about this authenticity piece, I'm not saying go out there and kind of tell the whole world and tell your whole follower base about all of your deep-rooted trauma, but showing some vulnerability shows that you're human, which means that people see that.
It connects, it resonates.
That person's experiencing what I've experienced. They get it. They've walked in my shoes. That's so powerful. But until you face that in yourself, it's very difficult.
You might not even know. It's unconscious. You're just not even aware of those formative experiences. So Tell me, not what we as an organization, but the phrase. What does the phrase total mental performance mean to you? If you had total mental performance, how would you know?
If I had total mental performance, how would I know?
Yeah.
Come back to what I'd said earlier, it's not about feeling good all the time, but it's about understanding why you are the way you are, understanding why I am the way I am, what those significant life experiences were that contributed, good or bad, to make me the person who I am today. And what that means is that I know that I can operate from a place of authenticity moving forward. And as well as that, it's understanding that life is going to present challenges, and that is going to come with difficulty, emotionally, psychologically. But that's okay. It's okay to ride those waves, as you've said, and still perform at a high level, not get consumed by that anxiety or fear, anger, whatever it might be. It's avoiding that emotional volatility, riding the waves. Sometimes just total mental performance is surrendering to the experience. Okay, this is where I am.
Surrendering, still fucking getting it done.
And still getting it done.
Yeah.
And still getting it done. Absolutely.
Well, look, I'm going to wrap up this podcast, but Dan, mate, it's an absolute fucking honor to have you on the team. And I'm just so excited what's coming up for us in 2023. Dan coming on board full time is just going to completely change the game. What he brings for us as an organization, as a team, for his clients, all of it. It's very, very, very exciting. What's your Instagram handle, mate, so everyone can find you?
It's Dan_TMP.
Amazing. And if anyone's got any questions or they just want to follow up, drop down a message, drop it in the comments. Please share this podcast if you found it helpful. And big love, mate. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. Really excited for the future.